Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world that smells faintly of rain-soaked cobblestones and warm chocolate, a time when doctors actually prescribed cocoa to treat sadness. Yeah, you heard that right. A sip of chocolate wasn't just dessert. It was medicine for melancholy. Honestly, if that was still true, most of us would have a lifetime subscription by now. You'd walk into the pharmacy like, "I'm sad again," and walk out with a steaming mug. You probably wouldn't survive Victorian London's hygiene standards, though, so maybe it's best we're only visiting through imagination. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where and when you're listening from. Are you curled up somewhere cold tonight? Or lying under the slow hum of a tropical fan? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the door of a narrow Victorian apothecary. The brass bell above the frame gives a tired chime, like it's been ringing the same sound for 100 years. The air smells of lavender oil, ground herbs, and, unexpectedly, cocoa. Not the sugary kind that reminds you of holidays, but a darker, bitter scent that clings to the wooden shelves and glass jars. Behind the counter, a man in a waistcoat and pince-nez looks up from his ledger. His face carries that particular Victorian blend of exhaustion and authority. "Ah," he says softly. "Trouble sleeping, perhaps? Or that dull heaviness here?" His hand rests briefly on his chest. You nod, unsure why you're agreeing. Maybe it's the hour. Maybe it's the quiet. He turns, selects a small tin from a shelf marked tonic mixtures for melancholia, and sets it before you. The label reads cacao, to be taken warm before midnight. You blink. Chocolate. As medicine? The apothecary gives a slow smile. "Not just any chocolate," he murmurs. "This is the kind prescribed by physicians. It soothes the nerves, calms the heart, and warms the spirit. You'll find it's better than most sermons." You can't help but laugh quietly. A doctor who prescribes dessert sounds like someone who truly understands the human condition. The man continues, wrapping the tin in brown paper, his movements steady and deliberate. Outside, rain begins tapping on the shop window, as if London itself were agreeing with his recommendation. Victorian London around the 1870s was a city obsessed with cures. For every ache, every sigh, there was a potion, a powder, a syrup. Society was anxious. Industrial smoke hung in the air, machines hummed louder each year, and people's nerves, as they called them, frayed easily. Nervousness was almost fashionable. Everyone from poets to housemaids was said to suffer from it, and when sadness came, as it often did in a world still mourning the old and fearing the new, doctors began to look for something gentle. That's when chocolate entered the prescription pad. Originally, cacao had arrived in Europe as an exotic medicine, not a treat. Apothecaries sold it alongside opium and laudanum, though with far more optimism. Early medical texts described it as restorative to the weak and soothing to the disturbed mind. And by the time you're standing here, in this flickering candlelight, it's not uncommon to see jars labeled chocolate elixir for the relief of sadness, fatigue, and fainting of the heart. You run your fingers over the smooth tin, its surface faintly warm from the shop stove. You imagine the cacao trees growing thousands of miles away, in humid forests where parrots scream and the air smells of wet leaves. Somehow their seeds have traveled oceans, crossed empires, and ended up here. As a Victorian comfort in a porcelain cup, you can almost taste it already. The first sip, thick and bitter, softening on the tongue like forgiveness. The apothecary pours a bit of the powdered cocoa into a mug, mixes it with hot milk, and offers it across the counter. "Drink while it's warm," he says, "for warmth itself is part of the cure." You lift the mug. Steam curls upward, touching your face. The taste is surprising. Not sugary like modern chocolate, but earthy, faintly spiced. It lingers on your lips like a whisper of cinnamon and iron. For a moment you feel quiet. Not happy exactly, but calm in a way you hadn't realized you'd forgotten. Doctors say, the apothecary adds as he cleans his spoon, that it strengthens the nerves, replenishes the blood, and banishes melancholy. He pauses. Though between us, I think what it truly does is give people permission to pause, to sit still, to feel something gentle for once. You glance at the rows of glass bottles around you. Each one promises relief. Tincture of valerian for nerves, laudanum for pain, coca wine for fatigue. And yet somehow this simple cocoa feels more honest than all of them. No grand claims, no chemical miracles, just warmth. You sip again. The rain outside grows steadier, a rhythm like a heartbeat. Somewhere in the back of your mind you recall reading that Queen Victoria herself was fond of drinking cocoa before bed. They said it steadied her after long days of mourning Prince Albert. Historians still debate whether she believed in its medicinal power or simply enjoyed the comfort of routine. But perhaps you think that distinction doesn't matter. Sometimes the ritual is the cure. The apothecary begins to speak again, his tone shifting into the patient rhythm of someone who's told the same story 1,000 times. Cacao, he says, is called theobroma, food of the gods. The ancients of the New World believed it gave strength and peace. We Victorians, of course, simply put it in a tin and charged extra. You smile. The humor lands softly, like the clink of porcelain. He continues. There was a physician in Bath, Dr. James Ellis, who swore by it. Said it helped melancholic patients far more than brandy or morphine. Another doctor prescribed it for soldiers returning from war, said it steadied their hearts. Of course, historians still debate whether that was science or sentiment. But then again, when has comfort ever needed proof? You glance once more at the label on your tin. The letters shimmer slightly in the candlelight, for sadness and fatigue. There's something achingly human about that. The idea that even in an age of soot and superstition, people still reached for sweetness when words failed. Outside, the rain slows. The apothecary closes the shutters and lights another candle. The room glows amber. You finish your drink and set the cup down. He nods approvingly as if witnessing a small victory. Better? He asks. You think for a moment, then nod. The heaviness hasn't vanished, but it's softer, wrapped in warmth. As you turn to leave, he calls out, remember, 1 cup before midnight, no later. The night works best when greeted kindly. You step back into the damp London air, the faint sweetness of chocolate still resting on your tongue. Street lamps blur in the mist, casting halos over the cobblestones. Somewhere a clock strikes 12, and just like that, your journey into the strange, tender world of Victorian medicine has begun, with nothing more than a sip of cocoa and a whisper of hope. You stay seated for a moment, the cup still warm in your hands. The doctor has turned away, arranging bottles on a shelf that hum faintly in the lamplight. Glass amber shadow. Somewhere outside, a carriage wheel clatters through rain, echoing against the cobblestones like the heartbeat of a tired century. The air smells of cocoa, lavender oil, and something metallic, a scent you can't name but that every Victorian room seems to carry, a mixture of faith and fatigue. You take another sip, and the sweetness lingers on your tongue like the afterthought of a lullaby. They call it the age of nerves. That's what the newspapers say. That the world itself has become too fast, too loud, too new. Telegraph wires buzzing through the air like nervous systems stretched across continents. Trains screaming through the night. The pulse of factories. The sudden, impossible brightness of gaslight. You can almost feel the century trembling, as if even time itself needs a sedative. The doctor says, most cases I see these days are nerves. Too much reading, too much thinking, too much living. He chuckles softly like he's joking, but his eyes don't join in. You imagine London at dusk. Thousands of souls pacing under smoky skies, clutching handkerchiefs and prescriptions, each convinced they are one bad thought away from collapse. People whisper words like neurasthenia, the polite term for sadness that doesn't know its cause. Back then, no one dared call it depression. It sounded too heavy, too final. Nerves was gentler, more poetic, a word that promised recovery if you just rested enough, or drank the right tonic, or apparently had enough chocolate. Your nerves are delicate, the doctor says. What you need is nourishment for the spirit. You almost laugh, nourishment for the spirit. Isn't that just a polite way to say eat dessert when life is terrible? But here in this century, everything is wrapped in moral sugar. Even pleasure must pretend to be medicine. He gestures toward a small cabinet in the corner. Inside are tins labeled cacao compound for hysteria and chocolate drops for the faint of heart. The handwriting is elegant, almost reverent. Women suffer most, he continues, especially those who read novels. You nearly choke on your cocoa. Fiction, he adds solemnly, overstimulates the imagination. You resist the urge to tell him that what truly overstimulates the imagination is a society where corsets cut off your air supply and emotions must be hidden behind lace gloves. But you nod politely. After all, you're in his world now. He tells you of patients who could not sleep for months. Their hearts raced as if chased by invisible engines, he says. We gave them milk, rest and cocoa with cinnamon, kissy for the nerves. A small smile touches his lips. It usually helped. The truth is, chocolate became a kind of emotional bandage for an empire too proud to admit it was breaking down. People drank it at midnight, wrote about it in diaries, prescribed it for broken hearts and writers' fatigue. In the quiet glow of this apothecary, you begin to sense what it meant. This age of nerves, not just as illness but as confession. Everyone was tired of pretending to be perfect. Everyone needed something warm to hold. Historians still debate whether this so-called nervous epidemic was truly medical or simply cultural, a symptom of a society newly aware of its own fragility. Some say it was a rebellion of the soul against progress. Others think it was just caffeine withdrawal. You glance at the shelves again. Bottles shimmer with strange ingredients: powdered quinine, beef extract, ammonium bromide, and cacao. The last one feels out of place, like a soft note in a symphony of bitterness. He pours another cup for you and says, "Drink slowly, let the heart rest." You sip and the room grows softer around the edges. Perhaps this is how they all felt: the weary clerks, the trembling writers, the mothers with too many thoughts. They called it nerves, but what they really meant was loneliness. The kind that presses behind the ribs when the world moves faster than your heart can follow. Chocolate, in those days, was their apology to themselves. A sweet permission to feel human. You look up at the doctor, wondering if he ever prescribes his own medicine. His hands shake slightly as he stoppers another bottle. You think, maybe this isn't just your diagnosis. Maybe it's everyone's. A fly buzzes lazily near the gas lamp. You notice the shadow of your cup on the table. A dark oval trembling faintly with each movement of your hand. It feels like a metaphor you can't quite name. Tell me, he says, do you dream much? You hesitate. Then lately, yes, I'm good, he replies. Dreams are how the nerves learn to rest. You smile faintly. Modern doctors would roll their eyes, but part of you wants to believe him. There's comfort in the idea that sleep, warmth, and sweetness could mend what's unseen. Outside, the rain deepens, turning the streets into mirrors. Somewhere, a horse snorts in the dark, and the sound feels oddly alive, as if the whole city exhales through its chimneys and sighs. You think of the word nerves again. Such a fragile word for something so vast. It was their way of naming the ache of modernity before psychology learned to label it. Maybe our century isn't so different. Only the vocabulary has changed. You take the final sip, and the taste has cooled to something more honest. Less sugar, more truth. You think if sadness could be measured in milligrams, the Victorians would have bottled it, prescribed it, and sold it under a prettier name. Somewhere behind you, the doctor hums a hymn, low, almost comforting. The room glows faintly gold from the lamp, and for a fleeting moment, you understand what he's trying to say without words. That in an age built on iron and progress, the human heart was still a fragile, fluttering thing, too easily overwhelmed, too easily soothed by a cup of warmth. You close your eyes. The hum of the city fades into the rhythm of your breathing. The age of nerves, you think, wasn't really about sickness. It was about the quiet panic of being alive, when everything else was accelerating, and maybe, just maybe, chocolate was the only medicine gentle enough to keep people believing that comfort could still be brewed in a cup. You open your eyes again, and the lamplight trembles like it's about to tell another secret. You linger in the apothecary a little longer, your cup now half empty, tracing small circles in the rising steam. The rain outside has softened into a mist, wrapping the cobblestone streets in something that feels like hesitation. Somewhere the city exhales, and you follow that breath back in time, far beyond London's gaslight and trembling nerves, because before chocolate was a comfort, before it was medicine, it was worship. You close your eyes and the air shifts. The scent of the apothecary fades, replaced by the heavy sweetness of soil and smoke. The faint crackle of firelight becomes the pulse of drums. And just like that, you're standing in another world, under the canopy of an Amazon forest where everything hums with damp and mystery. A woman crushes cacao beans with a stone, her hands rhythmic, sure. Nearby, a man pours a dark liquid into a carved gourd, lifts it to the sky and whispers something that sounds like gratitude or prayer. The drink is bitter and sacred even. The Maya called it zocolatl, meaning bitter water, and they believed it was a gift from the gods. In this world, cacao is not dessert. It's divine fuel. It strengthens warriors, blesses marriages and soothes grief. A strange trinity of strength, love and sorrow, the same elements that will follow chocolate through every century. You blink, and the jungle ripples into Spanish gold and cannon fire. Conquistadors step ashore, dragging the jungle's secrets into their ships. One of them, Hernan Cortés, sips the bitter brew for the first time and nearly spits it out. Too earthy, too raw. He'll add sugar later, because no empire ever met a sacred thing it didn't want to sweeten. The journey from forest to pharmacy begins right there. A bitter liquid stolen from the gods, made palatable by human vanity. Centuries later, when cacao finally reaches London, it arrives wearing a disguise, no longer divine, not yet indulgent but therapeutic. Apothecaries bottle it as cacao tincture, recommending it for fevers, exhaustion and melancholia of the gentle sex. You smile. Humanity has a talent for turning pleasure into medicine, and medicine back into pleasure. The doctor you met earlier reappears in your mind, his gentle insistence that cocoa can steady the nerves. But his belief, you realize, isn't new. It's the last echo of a much older faith, that in every seed lies a story of healing. You imagine one of those Victorian ships docking at the Thames, barrels of cacao rolling down the ramp, labeled not as food but as pharmaceutical material. Inside the wooden crates, the air smells faintly of rainforests and revolution. Londoners, with their polite hats and nervous hearts, have no idea that they're about to fall in love with something both exotic and intimate. In the early 1700s, apothecaries sold cacao as a tonic, often mixing it with spices like chili or cinnamon, though they claimed it was purely medicinal, not pleasurable. For the stomach, for melancholy, for weak constitutions, the labels said. But you can almost hear the customers lying to themselves as they take another sip, the way someone today might pretend dark chocolate is a health supplement. Historians still debate whether cacao's supposed healing power was genuine or simply fashionable pseudoscience. Some argue it truly did lift the mood. After all, it contains theobromine, a natural stimulant, and traces of serotonin precursors. Others think Victorians were just romantic hypochondriacs in fancy coats. You grin. Maybe both are true. Maybe humanity just needed an excuse to keep drinking joy without feeling guilty. Back in that imagined apothecary, you run your fingers along the bottles. Cacao elixir for the spleen, chocolate drafts for sleep. The handwriting curls like ivy, soft and deliberate. You notice that melancholy appears again and again, as if sadness itself were a fashionable accessory. You take another sip from your own cup. It's sweeter now, though you can't tell if that's from sugar or understanding. Funny thing, the doctor says behind you, startling you slightly. You didn't hear him come back. People once thought cacao too stimulating for women, said it could awaken passions. His voice drops to a whisper, the way people do when gossiping with ghosts. But then they decided sadness was the greater danger. So we let them have it in moderation. You laugh softly. So it was either heartbreak or chocolate? He shrugs. Usually both. He turns away again, muttering something about dosage and purity. You realize that in this age, medicine and morality were inseparable. Everything was measured not just by how it healed, but by how it behaved. And yet there's something touching about it. That this society, for all its rigidity, still believed warmth could mend the soul. Even if they didn't fully understand why. You picture a woman in 1840 sitting by her window as rain taps the glass. Her hands tremble slightly as she stirs her cocoa. The doctor said it would help her nerves. She believes him, because she needs to. And maybe it does, not because of chemistry, but because it gives her permission to pause, to taste, to exist quietly. Maybe that's all medicine ever was, a ritual for remembering gentleness. You lean against the apothecary counter, feeling the grain of the wood beneath your palm, the kind of texture that only time can polish smooth. There's comfort in it, a small human imperfection against all the polished glass. A carriage passes outside, and the sound draws you back to the present. You glance toward the shelves again, noticing one jar labeled cacao pulvis therapeutic grade. Inside, fine brown powder glimmers faintly under lamplight. You think of the forests, the rituals, the gods who once demanded cocoa as offering. And you wonder what they'd think of their sacred drink sitting quietly in a Victorian pharmacy. Wearing a paper label, maybe they'd laugh, or maybe they'd understand that even across centuries people still seek the same thing, a way to make the heart feel a little lighter. The doctor clears his throat. "So you see," he says softly, "medicine changes names but not purpose. People always need comfort. We just keep repackaging it." His words linger in the air, sweet as steam. You think about how strange it is. The journey of a bean from jungle altars to marble counters, from the hands of priests to the hands of doctors. Somewhere along the way, the sacred became scientific, the divine became digestible. You finish your cup and for a moment, you taste both worlds, the jungle's darkness and the city's light. It's bitter and tender all at once. The rain has stopped. The streets gleam like they've been rinsed of worry. You set the cup down and it leaves a faint ring on the counter, a perfect circle, marking where warmth once was. You don't wipe it away. Some traces, you decide, are meant to stay. You stand in the dim amber light of the apothecary, one of those half-forgotten corners of Victorian London that smells like cinnamon, soot, and a faint ghost of lavender soap. The air feels heavy, almost thoughtful, as if the wooden walls themselves have absorbed a century of whispered remedies and broken sighs. You're still holding the small paper-wrapped tin the doctor gave you earlier, the one that says cacao for melancholia. The ink curls across the label in gentle flourishes, like it's trying to cheer you up before you even open it. A bell jingles faintly behind you. The old apothecary himself appears, a tall bony man with spectacles that always seem one blink away from falling off. His waistcoat is dotted with cocoa dust, as if he's been tasting his own prescriptions. "Ah, you've come for the shelf," he murmurs. Not everyone sees it. His tone carries that conspiratorial warmth Victorians were so fond of, the kind that makes you feel like you've just been invited into a secret society without knowing the handshake. He gestures for you to follow him past rows of neatly labeled jars. Laudanum for sleep, tincture of violet, powdered pearl for faintness. But further back, behind a velvet curtain the color of wilted roses, lies something entirely different. You push it aside and see it, a narrow shelf lined with bottles so richly brown they seem to hum with quiet sweetness. Each one has a handwritten tag: chocolate elixir for melancholy, syrup of cocoa for weak spirits, powder for the heart's tremors. The apothecary smiles, half proud, half tired. "This," he says softly, "is where we keep the medicine for sadness." You let your fingers trace the glass. Some bottles are round and delicate, others sturdy like they were made for travel. They gleam in the candlelight like captured warmth. It feels almost sacred, like standing before a small altar dedicated not to any god, but to comfort itself. He takes one down, dusts the cork gently, and pours a drop of thick chocolate liquid into a silver spoon. "Not too much," he warns, "else it makes the heart race." You taste it. It's bitter at first, earthy, ancient, and then it melts into sweetness so soft you nearly forget you're tasting something medicinal. It lingers on your tongue like a sigh after crying. Victorian doctors believed chocolate soothed the nerves. They called it a nervine tonic, a balm for melancholia, and prescribed it alongside more questionable treatments: leeches, cold baths, and the occasional electric jolt. But this one tasted like mercy. You can't help but smile. Did people really believe it worked? The apothecary shrugs with a knowing half grin. Some did. Some just wanted a reason to drink chocolate twice a day. I've found the line between science and comfort rather porous. He taps his forehead lightly. They're especially up here. Behind him, a faint humming, perhaps the copper kettle warming on the hearth. The air thickens with cocoa and vanilla, a sweetness so enveloping it almost feels like a lullaby. You lean back against a counter, watching the small bubbles form and burst as he stirs another pot. He tells you about the recipes, each one handwritten by doctors who thought themselves pioneers of emotional health. Dr. Fothergill believed chocolate calmed the excessive flow of melancholy vapors. Sir William Daniel thought it restored the vital cheerfulness of the heart. You chuckle softly. Vital cheerfulness sounds like a product you'd see on TikTok now. Perhaps, he muses. But back then, Sadness was still a polite illness. You could speak of it at the table so long as you wore gloves. The shelves creak as a draft passes through. You notice more bottles tucked away higher up. Labels faded with time. For hysteria, for gloom, for the restless widow. Each name a small story of its own. The 1,000 untold hearts distilled into syrup. You pick one at random. Its label cracked but legible. Elixir for the melancholy gentleman of Chelsea. It makes you laugh. The apothecary joins you. "Ah yes," he says, eyes twinkling. Gentlemen of Chelsea were quite famous for their gloom. Too much poetry, not enough daylight. The candle flickers, and for a moment you swear the chocolate scent deepens, becomes almost like smoke. The shelves seem to shimmer faintly, as if each bottle remembers the hands that once reached for it. The lonely, the overworked, the grieving. Maybe that's the real magic of this place. The quiet understanding that sadness too deserved a ritual. Did it ever really cure anyone? You ask, your voice softer now. The apothecary wipes his hands on a linen cloth and thinks for a long moment. "Cure?" he repeats. No, but it reminded them they were still human, that they could still taste sweetness. He gestures toward the bottles again, and perhaps that's enough. Outside, rain begins to fall, the polite Victorian sort, a mist more than a downpour. It taps gently on the shop window, a rhythm that makes you sleepy just listening. You imagine all those people walking through the fog, clutching their little parcels of chocolate for sadness, hoping that inside the next cup there might be peace. You glance again at the shelf. Each bottle seems to hum quietly, like it's trying to remember your name. Maybe it's the sugar, maybe it's the history, but you feel lighter, like your ribs have stopped being quite so tight. The apothecary clears his throat. "You know," he says, "the first batch of this tonic was made from cacao beans brought up the Thames from a shipwreck off the coast of Cadiz. They were said to have absorbed salt from the sea, giving them a flavor unlike any other. Some people swore they could taste sorrow itself." You smile at the thought. "Sorrow-flavored chocolate," you say. "Sounds like a limited edition." He chuckles, shaking his head. "Perhaps, but I've always thought sorrow and sweetness were never truly separate. The best cocoa always carries a hint of both." There's a pause then. Long, quiet, thick with the scent of rain and warmth and something ancient. You realize the shop has no clock. Time seems to have folded itself neatly on the shelves, resting between amber bottles and brown paper labels. As you prepare to leave, the apothecary wraps your tin carefully, tying it with thin twine. "For when the nights feel too long," he says. "And remember, take it warm before the heart grows cold." You nod, slipping it into your coat pocket. The bell above the door chimes softly as you step back into the London fog. The rain feels almost kind now. Somewhere behind you, the apothecary closes the curtain and the secret shelf fades again into silence. But you can still taste it, that faint trace of warmth and darkness on your tongue. The kind that makes you believe, if only for a moment. That sadness was never meant to be banished, only softened. And as you walk away through the lamplit streets, your breath curling like smoke in the cold air, you find yourself smiling at the absurd beauty of it all. How, once upon a time, a doctor could prescribe chocolate for sorrow, and people actually felt better for believing it. The rain whispers against your collar. Somewhere behind glass and time, the shelf still waits, quiet, patient, and sweet. You walk further into the fog-dimmed evening, the tin of cocoa still warm in your pocket. The air tastes faintly of soot and rain, and somewhere nearby a carriage wheel hisses through a puddle. The apothecary's door closes behind you with that little sigh wooden doors make when they've seen too much. Ahead, a gas lamp flickers. Its light pools like amber on the cobblestones, soft, uncertain, alive. That's when you see him. A doctor standing outside his shop, top hat tipped low, moustache waxed to mathematical precision. The brass plaque on his door reads Dr. William Daniel, physician for the nerves. You remember the apothecary mentioning him, a man with a curious theory that melancholy could be treated through sweetness. The sort of man who could look at a cup of cocoa and see a prescription. He notices you, nods once, and gestures inside. The smell hits you first. Rich, warm, layered with spice and something faintly medicinal, like cloves left in a pocket too long. The doctor's office looks less like a clinic and more like a gentleman's parlor. A leather chair gleams near the fireplace, beside a table cluttered with teacups and silver spoons. And there on the mantelpiece, a pyramid of small wrapped bars, each labeled medicinal chocolate. For the temperamentally melancholic, he speaks with the crisp tone of a man who has lectured many times to people half listening. "You see," he says, stirring a cup, "the Victorians are afflicted by the mind. Not the body, not the soul, the mind. We read too much, think too much, repress too much." He looks at you over his glasses, and when the brain grows weary, the heart follows. That, my friend, is when chocolate becomes necessary. You raise an eyebrow. "Necessary, doctor?" He smiles. "Indeed. 1 ounce in the morning, 1 before sleep. Keeps the shadows away, or so I claim. My patients prefer it to laudanum, at least." The fire pops softly behind him. He hands you a cup. The chocolate is darker than before, thicker, almost velvet in texture. You sip. It coats your tongue with warmth that climbs up behind your eyes, makes the world around you soften at the edges. He takes a seat opposite you, opening a small notebook filled with looping script. You catch phrases like neurasthenia, melancholia, female vapors, and underline several times. "Prescribe cacao, not opium." "Dr. Ellis," he continues, "agrees with me." James Ellis, that is. A fine man, quite ahead of his time. He says sadness is a fever of the spirit, so we must cool it gently with pleasure that does no harm. You can't help but smile at that. "So you're curing despair with dessert?" "Better than drowning it in gin," he replies without missing a beat. "And the sugar helps medicine go down. Mary Poppins will say that, I think." He grins. You laugh softly, the sound surprising even yourself. For a moment, the heavy air of London feels less oppressive. The laughter of someone walking past filters in through the fog. The clock ticks in a rhythm that sounds almost like breathing. The doctor leans forward. "There's more science to it than you think. Chocolate carries theobromine, a stimulant gentler than caffeine. It steadies the pulse, warms the blood, sharpens the mind. Some claim it kindles affection too," he winks. I leave that part out of my official notes, of course. He stands, pulling a small box from his shelf. Inside are tablets the color of dusk. He presses one into your hand. "Try this tomorrow morning with sunlight if you can find any. And if you feel your spirits lift, send word. If not, well, at least you'll have enjoyed breakfast." You ask if he really believes in his cure. He pauses, his voice softening. Belief is half the cure. In an age where sadness has a dozen names and no answers, sometimes the act of preparing something gentle is its own medicine. You think of the secret shelf, of the way the apothecary had whispered for when the nights feel too long. It makes sense now, the chain of gentle believers passing warmth like a candle flame from one hand to the next. Not everyone approves, the doctor adds, sighing. The Royal College mocks me. They say cocoa is a confection, not a cure. But tell me, have they ever sat by a fire heart-heavy and tasted something that reminded them life is still sweet? You glance at the bars lined neatly on his desk. Each one is embossed with a tiny heart. You imagine the patients who came here. Pale women clutching lace handkerchiefs, overworked clerks rubbing their temples, widows wrapped in grief like shawls. All sitting in this same chair, tasting something warm and kind, and maybe, for a few minutes, believing in recovery. He writes you a prescription anyway. The ink looping elegantly. Take 1 cup before dawn. Repeat if necessary. Avoid despair in excess. You fold the note into your coat pocket. You know, doctor, you say lightly, this is the first prescription I've ever wanted to fill twice. He laughs, genuinely. Then perhaps you're my most promising case. Outside, the rain has softened into mist. He walks you to the door, his candle haloing the fog around you both. Remember, he says, medicine must always begin with mercy. And mercy, I've found, tastes a little like chocolate. As you step back into the street, the taste still lingers. You look up. The lamplight turns the drizzle into gold dust. A man in a bowler hat hurries past, newspaper tucked under his arm. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell hums 11 times. You wonder what it must have felt like to live in a time when sorrow had a flavor, when medicine could be poured, stirred, sipped. Maybe we've only changed the packaging. These days it's a bar with pastel wrapping, and a quote about self-care printed on it. You almost laugh at the thought, a modern echo of Dr. Daniel's belief. Historians still debate, you recall him saying earlier, whether these chocolate prescriptions ever truly worked. But you suspect they did in their own quiet way. Not through chemistry, but ritual. The act of pausing, breathing, and tasting something that reminded you the world could be kind. You stop at a corner where a baker is locking up for the night. Warm light spills through the window. Trays of unsold buns glisten faintly under the lamps. He nods at you, and for no clear reason you nod back. A moment later you realize you're smiling. When you finally reach your room, the street outside glows with rain and reflection. You light the small candle by your bedside, unwrap one of the doctor's tablets and let it dissolve slowly on your tongue. It's bitter and soft all at once, like remembering something sad but tenderly. You lean back in the chair, closing your eyes. The city hums faintly through the window, that same low rhythm of carriages and hearts, and for a brief, weightless moment, you feel it. The delicate peace those Victorian doctors must have hoped for. Not a cure. Just a pause. Just warmth enough to keep the dark from swallowing everything. And somewhere in the drifting edge of sleep, you imagine Dr. Danielle's voice again, calm and steady. Take 1 cup before dawn. Repeat if necessary. The doctor's handwriting curls like ivy across the parchment. You tilt the prescription toward the window, and the faint daylight seeps through the edges. It reads in the looping elegance of the 19th century, cacao warm. Taken before sunrise, that's it, no dosage. No stern warning about side effects. Just warmth, time, and ritual. You almost laugh, because it sounds less like a medical order, and more like something a poet might write after a sleepless night. But in Victorian England, this was not sentiment. It was science. Or at least, the kind of science that believed the heart and the spirit shared a single pulse. The bell of the apothecary door jingles behind you as you step into the foggy dawn. The street smells faintly of coal smoke and bread. In your pocket, the little folded note feels almost alive, humming with promise. Chocolate prescribed for sadness, who would have thought? The doctor, with his sideburns and his mild smile, had spoken as if offering divine revelation. Drink it before the sun climbs too high. Sadness loses its grip in the warmth of dawn. You walk home slowly, boots whispering against wet cobblestone. The city hasn't fully woken yet. Lamps flicker like sleepy eyes. You imagine the other patients, gentle women in shawls, office clerks rubbing at their temples, holding their own chocolate prescriptions, all heading home to stir something dark and sweet into steaming cups. A quiet army of melancholics armed with cocoa. Inside your little room, the kettle begins to sing. Steam gathers at the window pane like breath on glass. You unwrap the small block of medicinal cacao. It's bitter, almost harsh, nothing like the sugar-laden confections of today. You shave it into the milk slowly, watching it dissolve like ink in water. For a moment, the air smells almost sacred, like incense and earth and warmth all at once. You take the first sip. It's thick, heavy, comforting. You feel it coat your throat and chest, almost as if you're swallowing sunlight. Somewhere in that small gesture, there's a defiance against sorrow, against loneliness, against the grayness of mornings that arrive too soon. Victorian doctors often wrote prescriptions that read like poetry. Some ordered seaside air, others a change of wardrobe or even gentle horseback rides at dusk. And then there were the chocolate prescriptions, tiny spells disguised as medicine. They called it tonic cacao, or sometimes elixir for melancholia. The logic was simple but strangely profound. The heart could be coaxed back to life through pleasure. You picture a waiting room lined with portraits, the faint ticking of a clock. A young woman sits, pale and quiet, her gloved hands folded neatly. "I feel hollow," she says. The doctor nods gravely and writes cacao before sunrise. It's easy to scoff now, but then again, how different is that from the way people today scroll for comfort in glowing screens, hoping a warm light might reach the same place? The Victorians believed that morning held a special healing power. Doctors claimed the body was more receptive to restorative influences before the exertions of the day. In other words, if you wanted to mend a broken heart or a troubled mind, you had to start before the world intruded, and so it became a quiet ritual. Ladies kept small flasks of chocolate tucked in their handbags, ready for anxious moments. Gentlemen carried tins of powdered cocoa on long train rides, swearing it steadied their nerves better than any tonic. One advertisement even promised that chocolate renews the spirits when affection is starved. A bit dramatic, perhaps, but then again, heartbreak rarely inspires moderation. As the years went on, the line between medicine and indulgence blurred deliciously. Pharmacies began to sell chocolate lozenges shaped like pills, each stamped with elegant lettering, for the relief of melancholy and fatigue. A perfect marriage of science and sentiment. Some even believed that the theobromine, the food of the gods, worked directly on the soul, not just the body. You picture it, a lady sitting by her window at dawn, steam curling from her cup as the first light brushes the lace curtains. She lifts the drink to her lips, and for a heartbeat, her sadness softens. Somewhere far away, another does the same. They'll never meet, yet they share a fragile, invisible ritual, a communion of the lonely bound by warmth. A small smile creeps across your face. You realize how human that is, this need to ritualize comfort. Doctors, scientists, patients, everyone pretending there's logic behind what is really longing. You sip again. The chocolate has cooled slightly, the bitterness settling deeper. You imagine the doctor's face when you tell him at your next appointment that yes, you took your medicine faithfully, and you even went for a walk by the river afterward. He would probably beam, as if you just cured yourself with obedience and optimism. One Victorian physician, Dr. James Ellis, famously wrote that the heart requires nourishment of warmth, just as the body does of bread. He was convinced that sadness was not a defect but a hunger, and chocolate, he believed, was its answer. Others disagreed, of course. Some said chocolate made people too dreamy, too idle. A few moralists even warned it stirred passions unsuitable for polite society. Imagine being scolded by your priest for drinking cocoa before bed. What a scandal. But the more doctors argued, the more the public adored it. The simple act of preparing chocolate became a kind of rebellion against despair. Even the bitter taste was cherished, proof that comfort didn't have to be cloying to be real. As you finish your cup, the last traces cling to the rim like dusk at the edges of daylight. You set it down gently, as if afraid to wake something sleeping. Outside, the fog has thinned. The city exhales. For a moment, you swear you feel the faint echo of hundreds of others, those nameless Victorian souls, clutching their own mugs, breathing through the same fragile hope. And you wonder, did it work? Did chocolate really heal their sadness? The historians still argue about that. Some claim the effects were purely placebo. Others insist that the warm ritual itself, the pause, the stillness, the care, was the true cure. Maybe that's what the doctors knew all along. You rise from your chair and rinse the cup, letting the warm water run over your fingers. The scent lingers, faint but comforting. You think of those women on the trains, the men in their wool coats, the handwritten prescriptions folded in pockets. They weren't chasing sweetness. They were chasing gentleness, something that reminded them they were still alive, still capable of feeling warmth. The kettle cools, the room quiets. The world beyond your window begins to stir, and for a fleeting instant, before the day intrudes, you understand why those doctors prescribed chocolate. It wasn't medicine for the body. It was a whisper for the soul, an instruction to keep choosing softness even when everything else feels hard. You smile faintly to yourself, almost amused. Imagine telling your modern therapist that your treatment plan is a warm cup of cocoa and a sunrise. They'd probably smile too and secretly hope it worked. You step toward the window. The light has turned the color of cream poured into tea. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls. You press your fingertips to the glass, and for a moment, the warmth of your touch seems to echo through time. To that Victorian morning, to that quiet room where the doctor's pen paused over a name and wrote, "Cacao warm," taken before sunrise. And maybe, just maybe, he knew exactly what he was doing. You can still feel the faint sweetness on your tongue as you walk out into the afternoon fog. London hums softly, its breath a mixture of soot, rain, and something metallic from the factories beyond the river. You pull your coat tighter and wonder what it must be like inside those massive brick buildings, the ones where comfort itself was manufactured. By the late 1800s, the idea of chocolate had escaped the doctor's cabinet. It had slipped out of the apothecaries drawer, crossed the street, and found a home in factories, vast temples of steam and discipline. Cadbury, Fry, Rowntree, their names would become as familiar as lullabies, whispered through generations. Yet at this moment in your walk, they're simply dreams in motion. Dreams of comfort shaped into bars and tins, all wrapped in moral purpose. The Quaker families who built those companies had an almost holy conviction that chocolate could heal not only the body, but the nation's soul. They despised alcohol, calling it the poison that hollowed men's spirits. Chocolate to them was a soft rebellion, a warm, fragrant alternative that promised gentleness instead of fire. You pass one of their advertisements, pasted on a damp wall. A rosy-cheeked child holding a cup. The words beneath reading, pure, wholesome, restorative. You smile to yourself. If the Victorians had invented the concept of a moral dessert, this was it. Drink cocoa, save your soul. Inside the Cadbury factory, everything hums like a great mechanical heartbeat. You imagine the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and sugar. Workers in linen caps move like clockwork, stirring, pouring, wrapping. The machines puff out sighs of steam, and somewhere someone hums a hymn over the clatter of gears. You step closer in your mind, because that's what these stories let you do, and see that even here in a world of industry, there is tenderness. It wasn't always so. Before the Quakers took charge, factories were grim and cruel, places where exhaustion sat heavier than soot. But Cadbury and Rowntree believed in something radical, that a company could also be a kind of family. They built gardens for their workers, libraries, even schools for their children. The idea was simple, almost heartbreakingly so, that people deserved beauty in their daily grind. One story says that George Cadbury personally tasted the cocoa used for every new batch, fearing impurity like sin. He once wrote that a good cup of chocolate should remind the weary man that sweetness still exists in the world. You can almost hear him saying it, his voice mixing conviction with fatigue. Factories of comfort, they were called, and rightly so. For a brief golden moment, chocolate wasn't just a commodity, it was a philosophy, an act of faith. In an age when smoke darkened the skies, a cup of cocoa became a promise that warmth could be made, bottled, and shared. You think of the workers now, their faces glowing in the furnace light. They earn pennies, yet at the end of the shift they receive a small tin of cocoa powder as part of their pay, a ritual of gratitude and promotion in one. A woman pours her share into her apron pocket, smiling faintly. It's not wealth, but it's something like kindness. The historians still debate whether those factory owners were saints or strategists. Some say the Quakers' goodness was merely clever branding, that their philanthropy sweetened the taste of capitalism. Others insist they truly believed that commerce could serve morality. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between the sugar and the smoke. What no one argues about, though, is how deeply these companies changed the culture of comfort. Chocolate became the universal language of care. It was given to soldiers before battle, to widows after funerals, to children in times of peace. It was poured, melted, shared, everywhere the human heart needed reassurance. A funny thought crosses your mind, that somewhere in a modern city, someone's still doing the same thing, opening a tin of cocoa after a long day, adding just enough milk to make it thick, maybe even whispering that same promise. Sweetness still exists in the world. You stop by a lamppost and watch a factory cart rattle past, its wooden wheels squealing over cobblestones. On its side, the Cadbury crest gleams faintly through the grime. For a moment you picture the rows of tins inside, little brass cylinders carrying not just powder but a philosophy. Drink, be well, remember kindness. It's almost absurdly romantic to think that a company might have believed such things. And yet it's also true. The Quakers saw their factories as moral workshops. They built villages beside them, like Bourneville, where every worker had a small garden and clean air to breathe. Imagine that, a utopia funded by cocoa. Not bad for something that started as medicine for sadness. You chuckle softly, thinking of your doctor from the apothecary. How proud he'd be if he could see this. His humble prescription, cacao before sunrise, had evolved into an entire industry of solace. The irony would probably make him spill his tea, and yet beneath the industrial hum something quieter persists. You can almost feel it in the walls, the lingering ghost of comfort. Even the factory's heartbeat sounds steady, like a lullaby in metal form. The workers leave at dusk, their hands dusted with cocoa, their clothes faintly sweet. You imagine them walking home through the fog, carrying that scent with them like invisible armor against the cold. Maybe that's what comfort really is, not luxury, not sugar, but trace evidence of care. Something you take home with you without realizing it. You breathe out softly and watch the mist rise from your lips. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings the end of a shift. The city exhales too. You think about how strange it is that compassion at scale has to run on gears and steam. But maybe, just maybe, that's the price of spreading warmth, transforming tenderness into something that can be mass-produced. A man pushing a cart nods at you. His apron is stained with chocolate dust. You nod back, and for a heartbeat you share a secret. The understanding that even in a world of soot and noise, her single cup of cocoa can still feel like salvation. As the last light fades, the factory windows glow amber from within. For a moment it looks almost holy, like a cathedral built not of stone but of sugar, milk, and faith in small kindnesses. You keep walking. The smell lingers, faint and comforting. Somewhere behind you, the machines continue their rhythm, steady, tireless, eternal. The same rhythm that once belonged to the human heart. Factories of comfort, indeed. And tonight, you can almost believe that each bar, each tin, each sip still carries a little warmth from those first fires of faith, still whispering through time that tenderness, like chocolate, was meant to be shared. You rest your cup on the oak counter, the air around you still humming faintly with the scent of roasted beans and chalk dust. The apothecaries' shelves fade behind you as the scene shifts, gently, almost imperceptibly, into a narrow corridor of a Victorian laboratory. You're not sure whether you walked here or simply drifted. Either way, the walls seem to pulse with curiosity. Gas lamps flicker like tired eyes, and somewhere a kettle whistles, because even scientists apparently need tea. The age of nerves has given birth to another obsession, understanding what makes the mind tremble, what makes the heart ache, and what might possibly soothe both. You hear it in the click of glass, the scribble of quills, the faint bubbling of a copper coil. Men in long coats hover over diagrams of the brain, as if emotion could be mapped like railway lines. The word theobromine hangs in the air, elegant and mysterious. It comes from Greek, meaning food of the gods. You smile. That seems fitting for something that melts so easily in the mouth, yet claims dominion over the human soul. A bespectacled doctor stirs a cup of cocoa beside a microscope. His notes read something like, "Ingestion leads to slight euphoria, gentle warmth, measurable calm." Another page scrawled hastily, "Perhaps happiness in liquid form." You can't help but chuckle. Even now, centuries later, that sounds like something a modern influencer might put on a coffee mug. You move closer. The air smells of spirits, ink, and something earthy, like crushed leaves and burnt sugar. On the shelf beside him are small bottles labeled cacao extract for fatigue and chocolate elixir, nervous disorders. Some contain only dregs, others have crystallized to a caramel edge. You wonder if they ever worked. Historians still debate whether these concoctions truly changed anyone's mood, or whether the mere act of being cared for, handed a warm drink, told to rest, did all the healing. You remember how the Victorians had a peculiar fondness for diagnosing emotions. They catalogued sadness with the same precision they used for butterflies: melancholia, hysteria, neuralgia, ennui. For each ailment, they sought a cure that was civilized, dignified, and preferably delicious. Chocolate fit perfectly, exotic yet safe, indulgent yet respectable. By the 1870s, chemical journals began publishing results of small experiments. Cocoa increased pulse rate, lifted spirits, and, in the words of one enthusiastic gentleman, animated the most delicate constitution. It's strange, isn't it? That the same drink we now take for comfort before bed once lived in the realm of medicine. Doctors measured doses, not scoops. They recorded pulse beats instead of pleasure. But behind the science, you sense something almost childlike, a longing to understand why sweetness feels like hope. A faint hum draws your attention to another corner. There, a young woman in a stiff dress peers into a contraption of spinning glass. She's a laboratory assistant, one of the few allowed into such spaces. The liquid inside glows faintly brown under the lamp's breath. She writes, "Cacao's essence may calm agitation in the nervous system." Her handwriting is steady, confident, though you can almost feel how the men around her pretend not to notice. You'd like to tell her that a century later, her quiet work will be remembered, that one day, scientists will prove chocolate triggers serotonin and dopamine, the chemical poets of the brain. Someone sneezes behind you. The air vibrates with chalk dust. A professor wipes his spectacles and declares, "Gentlemen, the line between medicine and indulgence is but a matter of dosage." Laughter ripples around the room. You grin. That same principle probably applies to social media and caffeine, too. The laboratory feels half like a temple, half like a kitchen. Copper pans hang beside flasks. A ledger records every trial. Who drank, how much, and what they reported. Slight euphoria, sensation of warmth, contentment. One note simply reads, smiled again after 3 days. That one lingers. You imagine someone pale and tired from city fog, sipping chocolate and feeling, for the first time in weeks, something loosen inside their chest. You lean closer to a diagram pinned on the wall, a crude sketch of the human brain, annotated in looping ink. Seat of sadness, perhaps here. A small arrow points to nowhere in particular. The Victorians didn't yet have our neuroimaging machines or serotonin theories, but they did have imagination, and sometimes imagination was enough to bridge despair. Somewhere a gramophone sputters to life, playing a tune that sounds like raindrops on tin. The music softens the edges of the room. You take another sip. Did you bring your cup from before? And feel the warmth trace the same path through your body the scientists are trying to map on paper. The irony isn't lost on you. Centuries of study. And the simplest truth remains that comfort cannot be quantified. A small commotion near the door interrupts your thoughts. A delivery boy stumbles in, cheeks red from the cold, carrying a parcel of cocoa beans wrapped in newspaper. He apologizes for being late. The streets are icy, and his horse refused to move. The scientists barely look up. One of them mutters, "Beans of joy, gentlemen, fresh from Trinidad." The boy grins. "Smells like heaven," he says. You almost wish he'd stay. There's more humanity in his warmth than in all the instruments combined. You wander again, letting the scene dissolve into softer light. The laboratory blurs, replaced by the idea of hundreds like it. Hidden rooms where minds searched for the soul's formula. Some used microscopes, others used prayer. Some perhaps just trusted a spoon of sugar. The notion that happiness could be engineered fascinated the Victorians. They measured smiles as symptoms, laughter as evidence. And yet, through all their careful notes, something tender persists. They weren't trying to make life mechanical. They were trying to make sadness understandable. To give it a name meant it could be soothed. And what better symbol for soothing than a drink that begins bitter but ends sweet? You imagine one of them years later, retired and grey, stirring cocoa by a quiet hearth. Maybe he still believes in his research, or maybe he just enjoys the ritual. Either way, the steam rising from his cup carries the same hope that warmth can reach places words cannot. As the lamplight dims, your reflection wavers in the glass, half present, half dream. You realize the laboratory wasn't just a place of science. It was an altar to the idea that feelings too deserved study. Perhaps chocolate's real power wasn't chemical at all, but symbolic. It gave permission to feel fragile and to treat gentleness as medicine. Outside, night folds over the city like velvet. Somewhere a church bell marks the hour. You gather your coat, step back into the fog, and the smell of cocoa follows. It clings to your hair, your hands, like memory itself, warm, fleeting, and strangely alive. And as you walk, you think maybe we're all still experimenting, in our own quiet ways, measuring doses of joy, adjusting the sweetness of our days, trying to find that perfect formula for peace. The Victorians had their theobromine. We have our late-night chocolate bars and cozy playlists. Different tools, same experiment. You smile at the thought, letting the fog curl around you like steam from a cup. The city hums softly beneath your feet. Somewhere someone is laughing in a kitchen. And for a moment you could swear the air itself tastes faintly of cocoa. You find yourself drifting again, the soft hum of the laboratory fading into the whisper of porcelain cups and quiet laughter. The air grows warmer, gentler. You blink, and suddenly the room around you has changed. Walls papered with faded roses, the scent of sugar and steam curling through the air. Somewhere a clock ticks with polite insistence. You're standing in a parlor now, the kind reserved for slow afternoons and careful gossip. A tray glides past you, carried by a maid whose steps are soft as sighs. Upon it, delicate china trembles under the weight of thick, dark chocolate. Not cocoa powder hastily mixed with water, but real chocolate melted to velvet, poured into cups that look far too fragile for human hands. This is the Victorian afternoon ritual. Not quite tea, not quite medicine, but something between the two. The hostess, draped in silk, stirs her drink like a small act of defiance against melancholy itself. You sit instinctively, because that's what everyone else does. The chairs creak under corseted posture. The curtains let in filtered gold light. It's the hour when London itself seems to pause, when the city forgets soot and sorrow and pretends. For a fleeting moment, that sadness can be dissolved in sugar. Chocolate, by now, has wandered far from the apothecary shelves. No longer a prescribed elixir, it has become a gesture, a ritual of softness in a world too tightly laced. Yet its medical shadow lingers. Ladies still murmur about nerves and fatigue and winter gloom, and always, someone mentions that her doctor recommends a little chocolate in the afternoon. Just a cup, she says, to steady the heart. A soft chuckle ripples around the room. One woman confides she keeps a small tin of grated cocoa in her reticule. For emergencies, she whispers, as though sadness were a matter of national security. You can't help but smile. If only all emergencies were so elegantly handled. Outside, the carriages clatter. The rain performs its polite percussion on the windows. Inside, time folds in on itself. A pianist in the next room is trying with admirable restraint to keep green sleeves from falling apart. The warmth of the chocolate in your hands feels heavier than expected. You lift it, inhale the faint spice of cinnamon, and for a moment the world tilts toward peace. Historians still debate whether Victorian hot chocolate was truly enjoyed for its taste or its symbolism. Was it pleasure disguised as therapy, or therapy disguised as pleasure? The question lingers in every sip, in every soft sigh that escapes these carefully painted lips. Across the room, a gentleman joins the conversation, his moustache magnificent enough to have its own moral code. Cocoa, my dear ladies, he declares, is the most dignified indulgence left to man. They all laugh, though no one disagrees. He goes on to claim that chocolate prevents melancholy because it reminds one of the colonies, sunlight, exotic lands, and the illusion that life was once simpler. You wonder if he realizes how colonial nostalgia has been stirred into the very cup he praises. But you say nothing. You're too busy watching the steam rise, the way it curls like a thought you almost remember. You wonder if these women, in their lace gloves and guarded smiles, know how much of history they carry in this ritual, how something born from conquest has been transformed, through gentleness, into comfort. One of the women leans toward you. Do you find it helps? She asks. You blink. The chocolate, she clarifies. Faux sadness. Her tone is soft, but her eyes hold a fatigue deeper than fashion. You tell her you're not sure, but you like how it makes the room slower, the heart quieter. She nods as though that's the answer she expected. Perhaps that's all any of us need, she says. Something to slow the noise. Somewhere a log shifts in the fireplace. The flames flare, then settle. The conversation moves to poetry, to fashion, to rumors of a new chocolate house opening near Piccadilly that claims to serve scientifically balanced cocoa. You suppress a laugh. It seems science refuses to let chocolate go. You notice a small framed photograph on the mantel. A woman in morning dress, gaze steady, hands folded over a cup. Beneath it an inscription reads, "For the nerves and for the heart." You imagine she might have been here once, sitting in this same room, her grief diluted by the comfort of ritual. The idea of self-soothing wasn't invented by psychologists. It was brewed in moments like these, between porcelain cups and polite silence. A spoon clinks against china, and you realize this is their form of meditation, to stir, to sip, to be seen. The door creaks open and a young boy, perhaps a son or a nephew, rushes in carrying a letter from the post. "It's from Father," he announces. The room stills. The hostess breaks the seal, her hand trembling only slightly. A pause, then a smile. "He'll be home by spring." The tension softens. Someone laughs again, too loudly in relief. The boy is rewarded with a sip of warm chocolate. "Only a taste," his mother warns, "for growing boys must not become spoiled." You grin. Spoiling seems a very human, very necessary thing. Outside, the rain stops. A streak of sunlight finds its way through the lace curtains, catching the gold rim of your cup. For a moment, everything glows. You remember the laboratories, the apothecaries, the doctors with their careful prescriptions, and realize that somewhere between medicine and indulgence, chocolate became something else entirely, a language of care. Even now, the act of stirring feels ceremonial. You think of modern afternoons, where people cradle coffee cups or scroll through their phones for comfort. It's not so different, really. Different drink, same ache, same ritual. The world still turns to small gestures for big feelings. One of the ladies, half amused, tells a story about Queen Victoria herself receiving cocoa drops as part of her morning routine. "Imagine," she says, Her Majesty taking her medicine in sugar form. The laughter bubbles again. Beneath it, though, there's tenderness, a shared acknowledgement that even queens, like everyone else, need sweetness to face the day. The room begins to fade at the edges now, like a watercolor left out in the rain. The laughter turns to murmurs. The scent of cocoa thickens until it feels like memory pressing close to your skin. You close your eyes. For a moment, the centuries collapse, and you could be anyone. Someone sipping chocolate to forget or to remember. You rise quietly, leaving your cup half full. Outside, the street shimmers under a brief sunbeam. The cobblestones gleam as if the city itself has exhaled. You walk away slowly, warmth blooming in your chest. Maybe it's the drink, or maybe it's the thought that comfort, when shared, doubles in strength. Behind you, the parlor door closes with a whisper. The laughter fades into distance. And as you step back into the hum of London, you realize melancholy doesn't disappear. It dissolves one small, sweet sip at a time. You find yourself once more walking through the streets of London, the gas lamps burning faint halos through the mist. Somewhere a carriage rattles by, its wheels whispering over the slick cobblestones. You can smell the faint perfume of roses carried from an unseen garden, mingling with the warm, earthy scent of cocoa, drifting from an open window. You follow it, as if led by some small promise of comfort, until you arrive before a parlor lit in gold and ivory tones, lace curtains, velvet cushions, and the quiet hum of laughter inside. You step in softly. There they are, the ladies in waiting, corsets drawn so tightly that even their size seem rehearsed, gloves as white as frost. Their teacups gleam like little moons in their hands. Steam curls up, scented with cocoa, vanilla, and a touch of nutmeg. You can almost hear the music of their spoons tapping gently against porcelain. One of them leans forward, lowering her voice in that conspiratorial tone known only to those who share both privilege and boredom. "My physician says I should take chocolate twice a day," she says, lips curling in amusement. "For my nerves." The others giggle, half believing, half pretending to. Victorian medicine had turned melancholy into a fashionable affliction, one that suited lace and leisure alike. Chocolate, that once exotic tonic of the apothecaries, had now found its place in the drawing rooms of Mayfair. You imagine the shelves of these ladies' dressing tables, a jumble of perfumes, powders, and now, small tins marked pure cocoa, restorative, invigorating, refined. Somewhere between the laughter and the soft rustle of silk, you realize that what began as a prescription has become a ritual, a ceremony of comfort wrapped in etiquette. You see the way each woman lifts her cup, gracefully, delicately, as though sipping from the edge of an invisible sadness. And in truth, some of them were. The Victorians loved to dress their sorrow in elegance. It wasn't that they were less sad than anyone else. It's that they preferred their grief in velvet. One spoonful of sugar, a touch of wit, and the ache became almost poetic. You catch the scent of the chocolate again, dark, floral, faintly bitter, and remember the pharmacists from earlier chapters. The bottles labeled for melancholia, the doctors with their sweet prescriptions. Somehow the idea had escaped the clinic and entered the salon, as easily as perfume through an open door. One lady speaks of her sleepless nights, how she lies awake, mind fluttering with worries about her husband's investments and her sister's scandalous choice in dance partners. Chocolate before bed helps, she insists. It calms the heart. You can't help but think she's right, not because of chemistry, but because of the quiet ritual itself. There's something healing about holding warmth in your hands while the world feels cold. Across the room, a younger girl stirs her cup too vigorously, her glove slipping slightly as she laughs. The droplets of chocolate stain the lace, tiny perfect moons of imperfection. She hides them with a fan, pretending not to care. You watch her and realize, in this age of manners, even comfort must be graceful. The conversation shifts to gossip, then poetry, then fainting, the fashionable symptom of the era. Someone jokes that if every fainting lady had a cup of cocoa first, the smelling salts industry would collapse. You almost laugh aloud. The others titter behind their fans. Outside, rain begins to fall, soft and steady. You can see it through the lace curtains, each droplet glowing under the street lamp like melted pearls. For a brief moment, the chatter inside fades, replaced by the simple hush of rain and breath. The sound feels like exhalation, like the city itself is letting go. chocolate had become a mirror of that, a way to exhale, a polite rebellion against the relentless perfection of Victorian life. While men smoked cigars and debated empire, women gathered in corners of candlelight, seeking something gentler. And isn't that always how healing begins? Quietly. Some historians still debate whether chocolate truly had medicinal properties, whether the theobromine and caffeine stirred the blood or merely the imagination. But you suspect the Victorians weren't entirely wrong. Sometimes belief itself is half the cure. You glance again at the cups, at the gentle movements of gloved hands, the steam rising like faint prayers. These women, constrained by corsets and etiquette, had found a kind of sanctuary in sweetness. It was rebellion wrapped in refinement, comfort disguised as civility. You think of how many evenings like this must have unfolded across the empire, in drawing rooms from Edinburgh to Bombay, each cup a quiet defiance against loneliness. Perhaps in some distant mirror, you too sit among them, tired from the day, seeking warmth, finding it in something small, familiar, and sweet. One of the women recites a line from a poem, her voice calm and unhurried. To sip is to forget. For a heartbeat, the weight of the hour. The others nod in silence. You feel that line settle somewhere deep in your chest. The candles flicker lower now. The parlor grows dim. The conversation softens into the rhythm of sighs and spoons. You can almost imagine the city beyond. The river murmuring, the fog curling over bridges, the sound of a distant clock reminding everyone that time too is a patient doctor. You look once more at the half-empty cups. The chocolate has cooled slightly, its surface glossy and still. There's something melancholic in that image, as if every sip taken had carried away a little sadness, leaving only calm behind. When you finally rise to leave, one of the ladies catches your gaze. "Do try it," she says softly. "Chocolate, before the night grows too heavy." You nod, almost bowing, feeling the faint warmth of the moment cling to you like perfume. Out in the street again, the air feels damp but kind. You walk beneath the halo of a gas lamp, your reflection rippling in puddles. Somewhere behind you, laughter fades into the distance, replaced by the whisper of rain and the faintest aftertaste of cocoa on your tongue. You realize that you've stepped not just out of a parlor, but out of a collective dream, one built from porcelain, velvet, and the eternal hope that comfort might still be sipped, slowly from a cup. And as you walk, you think, maybe we haven't changed that much. We still dress our exhaustion in routine, still medicate our loneliness with sweetness, still believe that a warm drink can carry us safely through the night. The Victorians may have had their corsets and candles. You have your hoodie and your phone glow. But the ritual is the same. The same hope, the same quiet ache, the same small, steadfast comfort. You smile to yourself, breath misting in the cool air, and imagine the next cup waiting somewhere, sometime, for the next weary soul who just needs a little warmth before sleep. The carriages have long since disappeared, and the gaslights now tremble under a colder wind. You walk farther from the polished windows of Mayfair, boots damp from the uneven cobblestones. The scent of cocoa still lingers in your scarf, but now it mingles with smoke, coal, and something faintly metallic. The air feels heavier here. This is not the London of drawing rooms and lace. This is the London of soot, of iron, of hands cracked from labor. You turn a corner and there it is, a chocolate factory, its tall chimneys breathing clouds into the twilight. The sign reads Cadbury Brothers, Cocoa and Chocolate Works. The building hums softly like a heart that never stops. Inside, hundreds of workers move in rhythm, sleeves rolled, faces pale with exhaustion. Yet there's something oddly gentle about the scene. The air is thick with warmth and sugar, a sweet fog that clings to skin, softening the harshness of the world outside. You pass through the open doors. The noise greets you, the clatter of machinery, the hiss of steam, the endless rotation of copper drums. Women in aprons stir great vats of chocolate, their arms strong and steady. The scent wraps around you, cocoa, milk, vanilla, and suddenly you understand why even tired souls call this place the warmest room in England. Someone hands you a tin mug. "Drink," a voice says, "you'll get used to it." The chocolate is thinner than the kind poured in parlors, but the warmth hits you right behind the ribs. It tastes of comfort, diluted but real. Factories like these were not just places of production. They were refuges. In the 19th century, Industrial towns pulsed with hunger and soot. Cadbury, Fry and Rowntree, all Quaker families, believed in a strange miracle, that good cocoa could create good morals. They built their factories as sanctuaries from gin houses and despair. Workers were offered steady wages, clean housing, and hot chocolate instead of ale. You picture the early morning, hundreds of tired feet crossing the threshold, the factory whistles slicing through fog, and the promise of a warm drink waiting. It wasn't much, but to a laborer who had known only cold bread and colder rooms, it was a kind of grace. And though they didn't use words like mental health back then, everyone knew that warmth mattered. A cup of cocoa was a pause, a small kindness in an age of relentless motion. You wander farther, tracing the path of molten chocolate down a narrow channel. The foreman explains how sugar must be ground until it sings. You can hear it when it's ready, he says, tapping the copper drum. You smile. Even in industry there is poetry. One young worker laughs as she wipes a smudge of cocoa from her cheek. It gets everywhere, she says. Even your dreams smell like it. There's a sparkle in her eyes that you haven't seen since those candlelit parlors. Maybe comfort isn't only for the rich. Maybe it's just harder to find in the noise. Still, the work is long. The air grows hot. The machines demand endless attention, and exhaustion crouches behind every smile. You notice how they stretch their backs between shifts, how they share cups of cocoa not just for taste, but for companionship. It's a ritual, humble yet profound, and one that says, we are still human even here. There's an old story, says half legend, half truth, about a forewoman named Elsie who fainted near the mixing vat one evening. The doctor arrived, looked around and said simply, she doesn't need medicine. She needs rest and something warm. He poured her a cup from the same vat she'd been stirring all day. When she woke, she laughed. So it cures everything, does it? He shrugged. It's cured worse. Historians still debate whether those Quaker factories were acts of kindness or control, whether cocoa was truly charity or a subtler form of obedience disguised as care. But you suspect reality, as always, sits somewhere between. The workers may not have had wealth, but they had moments. A shared cup. A soft word. A sweetness that asked nothing in return. As evening deepens, the factory slows. The great wheels hush. The last tins are stacked and the smell of chocolate grows faint under the wind. Outside, families gather near the gates, children waiting for their mothers. You watch a small boy run up, clutching her hand. She kneels, opening her satchel. Inside, a small imperfect piece of chocolate, the day's leftover scrap. She breaks it in two. He grins, biting into his half as if it were treasure. You turn away to hide your own smile. The sky above is no longer grey, but a muted gold, the last light stretching across the rooftops. For a brief second, everything feels suspended. Soot, sweetness, silence. You pass rows of worker cottages, neat, identical, lined with tiny gardens. Cadbury had built them for his employees in a place called Bourneville, a model village meant to offer dignity in brick and window boxes. You imagine laughter spilling from those doors, the smell of cocoa drifting through kitchen air. Yet beneath the harmony, you sense fatigue. The world was changing faster than hearts could keep up. Machines multiplied, cities grew restless. Chocolate, once medicine for sadness, had become fuel for industry. Another rhythm in the grand machine of progress. Still, it carried its warmth. In every shift, every whistle, every steaming cup passed from one hand to another. There was that small reminder that comfort, no matter how ordinary, could still be holy. You pause beside the canal, watching barges loaded with cocoa beans drift under the fading light. The reflection of the factory shimmers on the surface, fire and water intertwined. You think about how something so dark, bitter, and distant from the Amazon forests could end up here, softening the edges of England's hardest lives. You remember the laughter of the ladies in waiting, the polished cups, the faint perfumes, and now you see their reflection in these factory workers. Two worlds apart yet linked by the same ritual. Chocolate was the equalizer, the quiet companion in both lace and soot. Your hands feel warm again. The cup is empty, but the comfort lingers. You realize that the sweetness was never just in the drink. It was in the sharing. The small pauses that made life bearable in an unkind age. You walk away from the factory gates, the hum fading behind you. The air smells faintly of sugar and iron. Somewhere a church bell tolls. The workers' windows begin to glow one by one. Like stars in the fog, And as you walk, you think maybe every cup of cocoa ever poured, whether in a palace or a factory, was really the same prayer in disguise. A small plea whispered into steam. Let it be warm enough to keep me human. The bells of the factory fade behind you as you wander further out of town, your boots crunching over the frost-slick road that leads to a quiet meeting hall on the hill. The lamps inside flicker like amber eyes in the fog, and the air smells faintly of wood smoke and warm milk. You're not here for another prescription, not tonight. You're here to learn why some people believed a cup of chocolate could redeem the soul itself. Inside, the room hums with a gentle stillness. No crosses hang on the wall, no incense burns, only plain wooden benches, a simple lectern and faces softened by candlelight. The Quakers sit together in silence, waiting for what they call the inner light to speak. It's an odd thing, this silence. No preacher, no choir, just the steady rhythm of breath. Somewhere in the back, a kettle whistles faintly and you realize someone's been keeping cocoa warm for after the meeting. How of course they have. The Quakers, or the Religious Society of Friends, have long been suspicious of anything that clouds the mind. Gin, beer, rum, those were poisons to the soul. But chocolate, that was different. Sweet enough to comfort, mild enough to calm. They believed it carried a quiet moral purity, a drink that soothed without seducing. As you listen to their whispers about temperance and kindness, it begins to make sense why so many of England's great chocolate dynasties, Cadbury, Fry, Rowntree, were founded by people who worshipped silence and sincerity. You watch one man in a grey coat rise slowly to speak. His words come like a tide, soft but certain. We must bring gentleness into the world, he says. If we cannot heal through prayer, then let us heal through kindness, or perhaps through a cup of cocoa. There's a ripple of laughter, but it's affectionate, the kind that comes from people who know sorrow too well. Outside, the world of the 19th century is hard and hungry. Industrial England grinds on iron, coal, smoke. But here these friends talk of comfort. They talk of chocolate not as indulgence, but as ministry. You imagine workers lining up outside their new cocoa houses, replacing gin halls with warm benches, trading the burn of alcohol for the quiet heat of chocolate. It's almost too wholesome to be real, like swapping your boss for a teapot, and yet it happened. The Quakers built entire villages around their chocolate works. Bourneville, the Cadbury town, rose from fields of mud into a utopia of red brick houses, clean streets and gardens blooming with roses. No taverns, no gambling, just family homes and playgrounds and the smell of roasted cocoa drifting through the air. The workers were paid decently, given days off, even access to libraries. You think of that, how a simple drink became the seed of a moral revolution. The irony doesn't escape you. These were still factories after all, machines clattering, hands blistered, profit flowing. But within those walls was a strange tenderness. The owners believed they weren't just making sweets, they were making virtue tangible. A happy worker, one Cadbury brother once wrote, is a righteous worker. You can almost hear him spoon stirring in his cup, believing that goodness could be manufactured alongside chocolate. There's something almost medieval in it, this faith that sweetness can save. Perhaps it's the same instinct that made monks brew beer in silence, or apothecaries label cocoa as medicine. Humanity has always wanted to bottle grace, to turn holiness into something drinkable. You take a slow breath, letting the idea settle on your tongue like sugar dust. One woman near you begins pouring cocoa into small tin mugs. The steam curls upward, soft and ghostly, like incense that's lost its way from the altar. When she hands you a cup, her fingers brush yours, warm, work-worn, real. Drink, she says simply. You obey. The taste is earthy and deep, not quite sweet, not quite bitter like kindness itself, unpolished but sincere. Someone mentions that chocolate, when mixed with milk, feels almost sacred. The bitterness of the beans softened by purity. The symbolism makes you smile. Victorians loved metaphors. They'd turn breakfast into a sermon if you let them. But there's truth here. Every generation finds its own ritual of healing. For these people, it wasn't wine and wafer, but cocoa and compassion. As you sip, the conversation drifts to business. The friends are uneasy about advertising. They don't like deceit, so their chocolate must speak for itself. Simple packaging, honest promises. Of course, history being what it is, that vow of simplicity will melt away in time. You know that the next century will coat these ideals in glossy posters and slogans about happiness. But for now, in this hall of quiet hearts, the purity still holds. Outside, the wind moans against the windows. Someone lights another lantern. The shadows shift across the benches, and for a moment the whole room feels suspended between prayer and dream. One of the younger men, his voice trembling, confides that he used to drink heavily before he found cocoa. It doesn't numb the pain, he admits, but it reminds me I can still feel warmth. You can't help it, you smile. That's the closest thing to theology you've heard all night. The meeting ends not with applause, but with silence again. Soft, weighty, comforting. You linger a little longer, cradling your mug. There's a sense that these people, in their plain clothes and steady gazes, have built something rare, a kind of faith that smells like chocolate and humility. When you finally step back into the fog, the night feels gentler. The town below glows faintly, the factory chimneys breathing out their slow, sugary sighs. Somewhere workers are coming off shift, their boots muddy, their faces lined with fatigue. Maybe they'll stop at a cocoa house instead of a pub. Maybe they'll sit for a while, trading jokes about the foreman, warming their hands on mugs that promise a softer kind of salvation. You pause on the hilltop and look back at the hall. Its windows flicker like little embers of hope. In a world that worshipped industry, these people built sanctuaries out of sweetness. The thought stays with you as you walk home through the fog, how faith and flavor once shared the same cup. And you think, with a quiet smile, that perhaps all belief begins this way, with something small, warm and shared. A drink, a gesture, a reminder that even in the hardest of centuries, someone cared enough to make comfort taste like chocolate. The night deepens. The lamps along the street grow dim. You pull your coat tighter, feeling the echo of that warmth settle in your chest. The cocoa may be gone, but the gentleness lingers, steady, unseen, a kind of spiritual sweetness humming beneath your ribs. You breathe out, the fog curling like steam before you, and whisper to no one in particular, maybe kindness was always the truest medicine. You notice the posters first, sun-faded, curling slightly at the corners of the apothecary wall. A woman in pale pink holds a steaming cup, her cheeks glowing with a gentle health that looks almost divine. Beneath her smile are words that feel oddly familiar even to modern eyes. Drink chocolate, the remedy for melancholy, advertising happiness. That's what they were selling. Not medicine anymore, but comfort in paper and ink. You step closer, your fingers tracing the embossed letters that once promised the public a cure for invisible sorrows. The Victorian doctors had begun the story, but it was the advertisers who turned it into poetry. By the turn of the 20th century, the world was learning how to sell emotions. Before influencers, before wellness brands, there were these posters, a mix of science, charm, and spiritual reassurance. You can almost hear the hum of London streets outside, the click of carriage wheels on damp cobblestones, as someone stops to stare at a chocolate ad, glowing softly under a gas lamp. The clever minds behind them were not just artists, but prophets of joy. The Cadbury brothers commissioned gentle illustrations of families at peace, children holding mugs, mothers resting their hands over their hearts. Fry and Sons showed women in white gowns, their sadness melted away by cocoa. Rowntrees chose bright daylight, angels of sweetness hovering in pastel clouds. Each poster whispered the same message: you deserve to feel warm. Of course, the real goal was to sell more chocolate, but there's something tender about their optimism, the belief that beauty, care, and a little sweetness could heal the world's weariness. You imagine one of those Quaker founders, spectacles fogged with factory steam, saying, "If it makes people smile, perhaps that's medicine enough." And maybe he was. Right? The science of sadness had started to evolve. Doctors now spoke of melancholia, neurasthenia, and hysteria, with newfound precision, yet the cure remained elusive. While laboratories filled with test tubes and tonics, advertisements offered something simpler. Hope, wrapped in gold foil. Drink a cup, they seem to say. And you won't be alone in your sorrow. You picture yourself standing before one of those shop windows. It's raining lightly. The glass fogs as you lean closer, drawn to the printed smile of the woman on the poster. There's a warmth there. Artificial maybe, but convincing. Behind you, the world smells of coal smoke and wet stone. Inside, there's the scent of cacao. The contrast feels almost cinematic. Outside, grey despair. Inside, sepia comfort. And that contrast sold millions of bars. A historian once wrote that early chocolate advertising didn't just sell a product, it sold a new relationship with emotion. People were learning that feelings could be soothed, managed, even packaged. Happiness, once a moral state, became something you could buy for a few pennies. You smile at the irony. The Victorians, so obsessed with restraint and propriety, were also the first to industrialize emotion. One of the earliest campaigns you come across bears the headline, "For the Weary Soul and the Tender Heart." Beneath it, a young woman reads a letter, her expression softening as she sips from a delicate porcelain cup. You can almost hear her sigh. The copy promises comfort and restoration without the ill effects of strong drink. A not-so-subtle jab at gin, because chocolate wasn't just sweetness, it was virtue. To drink cocoa was to reject vice, to choose purity and domestic calm. It's hard not to laugh a little. You imagine someone today saying, "I'm not stressed, I'm self-medicating with dark chocolate." And in a way, that joke carries the same logic. The advertisers understood that language before psychology had names for it. Their posters spoke to anxiety, loneliness, fatigue, the nervous troubles of modern life, and offered an edible ritual of comfort. In France, posters glowed with chocolate Meunier and sunny yellows and blues, children running home with their boxes. In Britain, Cadbury's cocoa essence was illustrated as both science and salvation. Absolutely pure, absolutely restorative. You can almost hear the Victorian mother whispering to her friend over tea, "The doctor recommends it, you know." And somewhere between belief and marketing, comfort became culture. The streets of Birmingham and York filled with factory workers who now recognized the same posters on every wall. The word chocolate began to carry new meanings, not just nourishment, not just indulgence, but reassurance, a small rebellion against the coldness of the industrial city. When a worker unwrapped a bar during a night shift, perhaps he didn't think of health or purity. Perhaps he thought of that woman on the poster, her calm face, her soft hands, and for a brief moment felt seen. That's the quiet genius of it, the merging of medicine and marketing into something deeply human. Of course, not everyone approved. Critics complained that emotional advertising manipulated the public, making people believe in miracles sold by the ounce. Some religious voices called it sugar-coated deceit. And yet, even those critics often drank cocoa at night. It's funny how easily comfort wins. You can almost sense how the culture was shifting, the apothecary shelves giving way to grocery aisles, the medical prescriptions replaced by slogans. The word tonic disappeared, but its spirit lingered in every glossy ad that followed. Some of the artists behind those posters went on to design the first cinema advertisements, and suddenly, chocolate wasn't just sold, it was performed. Women on screen unwrapped bars with a sigh of delight. Men gifted boxes of truffles as peace offerings. The product became a gesture, a language. Here, it said, "Take this, it will make things better." And somehow, it did. You remember the doctor from earlier, the one who prescribed cacao warm before sunrise. Imagine him walking through a London station decades later, seeing his once medicinal remedy turned into glowing billboards. Would he have smiled or shaken his head? Perhaps both. Because somewhere deep down even he must have understood. Humans have always wanted their medicine to taste like kindness. The posters around you seem to blur as the candlelight flickers. The smiling faces fade into sepia tones, their eyes soft, their cups eternally steaming. It's easy to feel the hypnotic pull of their promises. After all, who among us hasn't sought healing in something small and sweet? You take a breath, the air thick with the scent of old ink and cocoa dust. For a moment it feels like standing inside a dream of warmth, a museum of human yearning, painted in chocolate hues. As you turn to leave, you catch one last glimpse of a phrase printed at the bottom of an old Cadbury poster. For the comfort of the heart. It's not a sales pitch anymore. It's a benediction, the lingering echo of a century that tried to package joy and in doing so, revealed how much it was needed. Outside, the London mist waits for you. The lamps glow faintly, and the city hums like a heartbeat. You pull your coat tighter, still feeling that soft warmth inside, as if you've just taken a sip from one of those eternal cups. The posters may have promised too much, but maybe, in their own quiet way, they delivered exactly what they advertised. A momentary belief that sadness could be softened, one sweet sip at a time. You walk out into the cool evening air, the posters of smiling cocoa drinkers fading behind you. The world has shifted. The 20th century has arrived, bringing electricity, noise, and a strange new vocabulary for sorrow. Melancholy and nerves begin to sound old-fashioned, like corsets and horse-drawn carriages. Now people talk about depression, they talk about therapy. And chocolate, once a doctor's remedy, starts to move quietly from the apothecary shelf to the kitchen cupboard. You feel it. This subtle but irreversible change. The age of reason has tightened its grip, and the gentle mysticism that once surrounded cocoa begins to dissolve. Laboratories hum where once there were drawing rooms. Men in white coats replace the kindly apothecaries with their handwritten labels. Pills are precise, measurable, chemical. Chocolate, with its humble sweetness, seems almost naive in comparison. Still, it clings to its old purpose. It refuses to vanish completely from the vocabulary of care. Doctors begin prescribing other cures: lithium, bromides, chloral hydrate. Machines whir in asylums. New treatments flicker with electricity. Freud publishes theories that turn sadness into science. You can almost hear the scratching of his pen somewhere far away in Vienna, describing dreams, desire, and despair with the same clinical detachment one might reserve for anatomy. Somewhere in this shift, chocolate loses its white coat. It becomes indulgence, not instruction. Pleasure, not prescription, and yet, not entirely. You notice how people keep reaching for it anyway, slipping squares of dark chocolate into their mouths during heartbreak, clutching mugs of cocoa after bad news. Even when medicine grows more mechanical, the instinct for sweetness remains stubbornly human. It's a quiet rebellion against modern sadness. You find yourself in a late Victorian tea room turned early Edwardian cafe, the kind with soft lamps and curved mirrors. A young woman sits alone, her hat still on, a book unopened before her. She's ordered a cup of hot chocolate. Steam curls upward like a sigh. Around her, the world rushes forward, telegrams clicking, automobiles coughing, the modern city vibrating with invention. But she sits still, spooning warmth into herself one sip at a time. That's the thing about progress. It gives you cures, but not always comfort. Chocolate no longer carries the authority of a physician, yet it holds something deeper, a memory of gentleness. Even as society grows obsessed with efficiency and results, the act of drinking cocoa remains defiantly slow, and maybe that's what people still needed. By the 1920s, advertisements no longer speak of tonics or elixirs, they speak of luxury, of indulgence. A Cadbury poster shows a modern woman with short hair and pearls, smiling with independence, not healing, not mourning, just enjoying. The message has changed, but the undercurrent is the same. This will make you feel better. You think of how the Victorians would have reacted, those serious men who once believed that melancholy could be measured by pulse rate, who prescribed cacao before sunrise. They might have scoffed at the idea of pleasure for pleasure's sake. But deep down, perhaps they would have understood. The line between medicine and kindness was always thin. Some historians still debate the moment chocolate officially stopped being medicine. Was it when pharmacology advanced past plant-based tonics? When sugar prices dropped? When emotional suffering became the domain of psychiatrists, not poets? The truth, as always, is messy. Humanity rarely abandons comfort entirely. It just renames it. And so chocolate stayed. When soldiers went to war, governments packed chocolate in their rations. When the Great Depression hit, it became the affordable luxury people clung to. During World War II, cocoa powder traveled across oceans in supply crates, labeled as essential morale material. Not medicine, but close enough. You remember how Victorian doctors once prescribed it for heartbreak. Now generals prescribe it for courage. That's progress in its own strange way. In the mid-century world of steel and neon, new pills arrive promising calm. Valium, Librium, antidepressants. The language of sadness becomes chemical, serotonin, dopamine, imbalance. And while those words hold power, real, measurable power, something in them feels cold. Chocolate, meanwhile, stays warm. You imagine a woman in the 1950s standing in her kitchen after the children have gone to bed. She's tired, too tired to talk about her feelings in clinical terms. So she opens the cupboard, melts a few squares in warm milk and sits by the window. The drink doesn't cure her. It never really did, but it softens the edges. That's enough. It's always been enough. In the age of modern psychiatry, people begin to speak of self-care. The term would have made Victorian physicians laugh, but its spirit would have been familiar. After all, wasn't every chocolate prescription a small act of self-care in disguise? There's something timeless about that gesture, the willingness to comfort oneself, to pause, to sweeten the bitterness of being alive. You can almost feel the thread stretching back through time, from the apothecary's shelf to the Edwardian cafe, to this very moment where you sit, listening, maybe holding your own cup of something warm. Some truths outlast their terminology. Chocolate may no longer wear the title of medicine, but it still performs the role. Humbler, quieter, more honest. It doesn't promise to erase sadness. It promises to accompany it. And that's the secret the Victorians might have been chasing all along. You think of those old doctors, their earnest handwriting, their tiny glass bottles labeled for melancholia. You think of the patients clutching cups of thick cocoa, hoping for relief. And you realize in their fumbling way, they understood something our age often forgets, that healing isn't always a cure. Sometimes it's just company. The modern world likes precision: diagnose, medicate, resolve. But the heart doesn't follow prescriptions neatly. It wanders, it aches, it craves sweetness. You laugh softly to yourself. Maybe Freud should have tried a bit more cocoa. The street outside glows faintly with electric light. The era of carriages and lamplighters has faded. The hum of engines and the buzz of neon fill the air instead. Progress tastes like metal and ozone, and yet somewhere someone still stirs a cup of hot chocolate. Maybe they don't think of Victorian doctors, or melancholy, or theobromine. Maybe they just think, this helps, and that simple thought, quiet, unscientific, and deeply human, carries more truth than any medical paper ever could. You exhale, letting the imagined warmth spread through you, as if every sip through history has flowed into this moment. Chocolate has changed names, lost its prescriptions, gained new meanings, but its purpose has remained the same: to remind you that even in the most mechanical of ages, the heart still listens best to kindness. And somewhere, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant whisper of traffic, you hear it again. That soft, reassuring promise that's lasted for centuries. Drink, rest, feel better. The city exhales with you. The world outside continues to spin, faster now, louder, but for a few moments, the centuries seem to dissolve. You are still that quiet figure in the apothecary, cup in hand, listening to the doctor say, "Take this, it will help with the sadness." And maybe, just maybe, it still does. The room is dim again, but this time you don't flinch at the darkness. The night has learned your breathing, your rhythm. A faint hum lingers, perhaps from the kettle you forgot to turn off, or maybe from the echo of every story you've wandered through. The cup in your hand has gone lukewarm, a dull circle of comfort pressing into your palm. The last sip waits like a memory that refuses to fade. You stare into it and the reflection trembles. It isn't just chocolate anymore. It's the echo of centuries. You remember the doctor's office, the soft rustle of parchment, the prescription that said cacao warm before sunrise. You remember the women whispering through lace gloves, the factory bells ringing, the Quaker men who prayed for gentler worlds through steaming cups. Every era has left a trace in your drink. There's something almost sacred in how ordinary it feels. The Victorians would have said it was good for your nerves. You smile a little, if they saw you now, headphones in, blanket cocooned, listening to the hum of an unseen world. They might diagnose you with melancholia moderna, and they'd prescribe the same thing you're holding: a touch of warmth, a bit of sweetness, and time to sit still long enough to taste it. The walls around you breathe with the memory of those old apothecaries. You can almost smell them again: rose oil, camphor, cocoa, and the faint dust of powdered glass from a bottle just opened. It's strange how the mind can resurrect entire rooms from a single scent. Historians still debate whether chocolate truly helped the nervous disorders of the 19th century. But sitting here, you suspect the answer doesn't matter. Healing, after all, has always been part science, part hope. You take another sip and the bitterness at the bottom of the cup catches you by surprise. It reminds you of something one Victorian nurse once wrote in her diary: how the poor patients preferred their cocoa extra sweet, so the sadness won't taste so sharp. She believed sincerely that the act of stirring sweetness into sorrow was its own kind of medicine. You wonder if she ever realized how poetic that was. The window hums with night wind, Somewhere outside, a car passes. A modern ghost in this slow world you've built for yourself. You think about how comfort has changed. Where once people sought tonics and tinctures, now we reach for playlists, glowing screens, a cup that warms the hands. Yet the yearning remains the same. The Victorians wanted to quiet the noise in their heads. You want to quiet the noise of everything. Maybe that's why their stories still find you. You lean back, and for a moment the line between past and present blurs completely. You're both the patient and the storyteller, the one sipping and the one prescribing. If the doctor were still here, he'd probably smile with that gentle pride of men who believed they could cure sadness with sugar and faith. And maybe in a small human way they weren't wrong. Chocolate was never just food. It was ritual. It was comfort disguised as chemistry. Theobromine, serotonin, dopamine. The Victorians didn't know those words, but they understood their effect in simpler language. The soul lifts. You feel it too in the quiet rise beneath your ribs, in the slow surrender of your thoughts. Funny thing, people once called cocoa the drink of gods, and yet here you are, mortal and messy, sipping it out of a chipped mug. But maybe that's the point. Divinity has always hidden best in the small things, in warmth, in sweetness, in the quiet patience of a cup cooling beside you. You remember then how the whole story began. The midnight pharmacy, the doctor's candle flickering against brown glass jars. You hadn't realized at the time that he wasn't really giving you medicine. He was giving you permission. Permission to pause, to rest, to believe that care could be simple. And perhaps that's what every generation has tried to do since. Make sadness manageable. They've built entire industries on the hope that we can buy calmness by the ounce or scoop comfort into a tin. But comfort, you think, has never been about invention. It's about attention, about noticing the way the cup feels in your hand, about letting yourself taste what's already here. The wind stirs the curtain again, a whisper through fabric. You look down. Only a dark smear remains at the bottom of your cup. For a second, it looks like the map of a continent you once dreamed of visiting. Then it fades like all things do. You exhale slowly. You've arrived somewhere, though you haven't moved at all. The Victorians called it restorative sleep, the idea that the body heals when the mind surrenders. It sounds clinical, but there's poetry in it too. Tonight, as your eyelids grow heavy, you realize the entire story has been guiding you here, not to history, but to stillness. Every doctor, every apothecary, every nervous soul sipping in the half-light, they were all reaching for the same thing you are now, a quiet that doesn't demand explanation. So you let the cup go. It lands softly on the bedside table, a muted sound in the dark. The air hums, the world steadies, and you understand at last. Maybe healing isn't about banishing sadness, but about befriending it, learning to sit beside it with something warm in your hands. From those Victorian doctors who believed in cacao's cure, to your own small ritual at the end of the day, the message has never changed. We're all trying in our own imperfect ways to be gentle, to offer comfort where certainty fails, to remind ourselves that softness too has power. The last sip cools and you watch it fade into shadow. The world once sharp begins to blur around the edges. The candle of the old apothecary gutters out somewhere in memory. The city quiets. You sink deeper. The hum becomes a lullaby, and even time seems to take a breath. The night has folded you in like a page closing softly on the final chapter. You let it. Because here in this stillness, in this faint sweetness lingering on your tongue, you've learned the only cure that's ever truly worked. Kindness. End of script. Sweet dreams.